Hey there. Now, what if I told you one late night experiment led to the building of one of the first online schools for audio education in the world that eventually led to selling it to a global institute? Hi there, I'm known as Audio, and I know that's a bold claim, but I am Audio on Twitter, which is now X. I've had that handle since 2007. When I had my online audio school. So I want to take you through how I went from being a passionate musician, sort of tinkering with online audio courses, to eventually empowering thousands of people around the world through online education. And I'm talking like the late 90s, early 2000s, when it was rocket science. And so now I'm focused back on YouTube, bringing more courses, more production techniques, AI, writing, guitar playing, everything that I do, I just want to share, and I want to share my journey with you as we build this channel. So my first kind of venture into music was my dad's vinyl collection in the living room. We were kind of poor, and it wasn't until Dad started his own business when I was probably about, 9 or 10, 11, where he started to make a bit more money, and this amazing hi-fi arrived in the house. And all these records started building up. So I was just fascinated pulling out things like Jimi Hendrix, the Beatles. Dad actually played guitar. There was always a couple of guitars around the house, quite often with like a string missing or whatever, because he was no longer an active musician. He played in his teens. He was in a skiffle group. And used to play a lot of rock and roll with his mates. One of his mates had like a tea chest bass thing, and also my uncle was well into music in terms of the electronics side. He actually built synthesizers. Now I don't know if any of you people can remember this, but there used to be a bunch of synths that came out in the early 80s, which was called the DX range, the DX21, DX9, DX7. He was all over that, and leading up to that point, he had actually been building synthesizers, analog synthesizers, and repairing studios and supplying musicians with analog synths. So this music sequencer arrived in my bedroom, which was called a CX5 by Yamaha, an 8-bit music synthesizer. A computer with a MIDI keyboard, and so that arrived because he bought this and he wasn't using it, so it came to my room, and like I was just blown away actually with what this could do. How I could just capture music electronically and make little songs and put bass lines together with melodies and drum parts, and it was, for a young kid, my early teens, it was just phenomenal. So I went from that guitar thing to this computer thing, the music technology, and my world was just like, oh my god, this is just what I want to do. I ended up getting a job in a guitar shop. I kept playing guitar. I joined bands. I was in my first band was a kind of in the mid 80s, like an early indie, we had leather trousers on, spiked hair, earrings. We did Sex Pistols covers, Cure, our own songs. Half the set was our own songs. I wrote with one of the other members of the band. It was a brilliant time out gigging. It was absolutely phenomenal. Then I went off and I joined the military. I was in the military for a while, but as an electronics engineer for helicopters, and that gave me a really good grounding in audio electronics, actually. So when I came out, because I didn't last long, I found out I was far too creative and entrepreneurial to be in the military. I had great times, great memories, and it gave me a lot of good discipline about life and working with people. So I don't have regrets about that. It was good experience in many ways. But when I came out of there, I started doing some work in recording studios. And I was in a band with this guy, phenomenal musician, the sort of guy that can just listen to music and transcribe it onto a piece of paper. He would write out bass parts, complex drum parts. It was a phenomenal transcriber of music. So I ended up in this, what was a working band. We were doing clubs and holiday parks, and we were really busy. We were a jazz band on Sundays. I was playing guitar. And he was having some time out for me to teach. He was a music teacher in schools. And he said, I'm starting up at this college. There's a brand new college in town. Will you come and teach music technology, And I was like, no. I was like in my early 20s by now, pretty vulnerable, shy, I always had this inner confidence, but I found it difficult sometimes being overly confident in front of other people. So the thought of standing up and teaching in front of other people was really fucking scary. And I think he saw something in me which I didn't know was there, but it was there. So I said, yeah, okay, after a while, because he persisted, and I went to teach. Yeah, and we started up music technology schools in a local college. I'm talking like 94, I think it was. We started with like 10 part-time students, teaching them how to, run a studio, wire cables, about amps, early sequencers, tape machines. We were actually teaching them how to, take a reel-to-reel tape machine, get your splicing block out and cut the tape, stick it back together, all this kind of stuff. Brilliant times. And I was successful at it. And I think in hindsight, I think I realized then that I had the entrepreneurial streak, particularly in the music area. So I ran that for a long time, and we built up the courses. We had more students, and it went on for 4 or 5 years. I had a year out, went to live in Italy, did some musical things over there, did some more things with computers and CD-ROMs. I got asked back to write a degree, went back. And through that time, I was like, I don't have any qualifications. I've never been, I've never learned how to be a teacher. I also, from childhood things, I was dealing with like the fraud and the imposter syndrome, and it always felt like, oh, I'm not sure how comfortable this is, but I carried on anyway. And I had some great times, and I thought, I'm just going to get a qualification. So I enrolled onto a master's in open and distance education, online education. This is like the end of the 90s, like 98, and for my thesis for that, I developed, designed, and built an online school. It was called audiocourses.com. And it seemed like I'd found a market, I'd found a niche that people wanted, And I ran it for 8 years, 9 years. Literally, people were enrolling from, like every corner of the globe. I mean, I'm talking all over the globe. And every Sunday or whatever, we used to get together and have these online workshops where all these different people from different countries, we'd have a room of 15 people just talking about music production and their passion for music, their tips and tricks, writing music, compression and bass lines and drum programming. And it was brilliant, and this is like the early 2000s. And I can remember the people that were in it, like myself, and I had some guys who were helping me with doing some of the teaching. We called them production advisors, and the students. They were like loving this. They would just think, they thought it was amazing. And it kind of was, right? It was one of the first in the world, don't forget here. This was like brand new rocket science. But I struggled a little bit because all those friends and family around me, not all of them, but the vast majority of people, for unwittingly, they just didn't get it. And I was like, no, this is the way this is going. This is the future. And they're like, what are you talking about? Online music education, online music production, how does that even work? And they were just like, you're crazy. I knew wholeheartedly, that the future was digital and the future was online. It felt like the audiocourses.com was great. It was good. It was generating money, good money, yearly. Lots of students were enrolling. It was good, but it was always felt like, and I think there comes a point in most entrepreneurs' journeys where you think, do I want to do this? Is this working? What can I do? And it sort of reached a plateau of enrolling so many, but it never exploded. And when I look back on that, that's because I didn't reach out and find investors to scale it. I just ploughed on and kept. It was almost felt DIY. It wasn't. We had like 35,000 members on the website, and the forums were active. Lots of resources, and I can remember. Like I said, I moved to Italy and I moved back to just outside London, and I was sitting in my studio upstairs in this loft of this rental. I wouldn't say struggling. I had a job. My wife had a job. We just had a first kid, but it was like, yeah, things are tight financially. It's not easy. Should I keep doing this audio courses? And I must admit, I remember reading a book and thinking, yeah, maybe I should just give this up and not bother with it. And I contemplated it, and I thought, yeah, I'll just pull the plug and not do this, do something else. And that's interesting, because it was literally a week or two later, I had this email out of the blue from this guy called Rudy. He said, hey, I don't know, I can't remember the words. Maybe I'll find the email and put it up on the screen. But it was something along the lines of, we'd like to buy your school. And I honestly, at the time, I thought, yeah, this is some kind of joker. Like, this is ridiculous. Somebody wants to buy this, And I'd never even considered it as a thing to sell, if I'm honest. It was just something I did, and I liked it. It was more than a hobby, but it was still kind of like, yeah, it's fun. I had a podcast on it. We had hundreds of thousands of listeners to my podcast. And the podcast was, talking around music production, how the school's going, techniques, playing some independent music. And I was just fooling around as a DJ for a while, back in, like I said, early 2000s, doing these podcasts. It was brilliant fun. And I remember, I can think about it, and I started talking about some things on that podcast that I might do for the school. Like maybe I would get a campus, a real campus with studios in. And I kept talking about that a bit. I can remember dominating Google. Back in the day, if you typed into Google anything to do with audio and courses, that kind of stuff, I was just all over it. Because I'd learned how to play that game very early on, and I just dominated search rankings. So it was great, So I know for a fact I was pulling a lot of traffic away from these other places, which is great because it was, it was my concern. That's what I wanted. Now that might have been a factor in the reason they reached out to me. But I don't think it was it was all that. What they wanted was, they wanted to get into the online game, and of course, if you're a big company, rather than reinventing things yourself, you have an acquisition, and you bring that in. But I was skeptical of this email, so I wrote back something like, "Who is this? Are you I didn't say you a joke. I can't remember, but it was along the lines of, can you send me an email or or can you send me an email from your official email account so I can verify this, And oh my God, he did. I was like, oh my God, what? Somebody wants, and that was a really validating experience. Somebody wants to buy this concern as a business. So, I pondered on it for a while, and I thought, yeah, I do want to sell it because my wife and I just had our first kid. We were in this rental place. We didn't have our own house. We were kind of not skint, but we weren't flush. It was pretty tight money wise. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I struck a deal with the owner of the SAE Institute. SAE Institute bought it from me. Bought my audiocourses.com. I struck a deal with him over some. He said, "Come into Chelsea in London and we'll talk about it." And I struck a great deal for, a huge bag of cash, which enabled me to buy a house. And then the arrangement was that I'll stay on with them for 3 years in a consultancy capacity to see the transition of, my processes and my workflows, how my school runs, how it all operates, into theirs. So basically they had an online component, within a few months. And during that period, it was great. Those 3 years of consultancy were brilliant. And I must admit, I thought that would go on forever. They were paying me a crazy amount of money. It was brilliant. We had lots of cash. It was great. And I met some brilliant people, like VIP producers, but, well-known producers, putting courses together with them. I had a brilliant time. It was fantastic. Went to all different parts of the world. And I didn't think that would end. I thought that would keep going forever. Anyway, then I remember hearing that this SAE Institute got bought out, and I didn't think that much of it. But then, sure enough, 6 weeks later, I got a call from SAE and said, "Oh, we're not going to need you anymore, and you've got about a month left now." We just moved into a big house, big expenses, big mortgages, had another child, and I honestly, when I think about it now, I was terrified. Like, my ego was bruised. I went from earning this, it was 10,000 a month or more, it was decent cash, to nothing overnight. And, the whole world imploded. I felt so useless, scared, the whole thing was traumatic, and when I think about it now, it's still kind of, wow. But you know what about that? It was one of the best things that happened, because I then picked myself up, rubbed the dirt off my body, and I thought, right, fuck it, let's go back and do something else. So then what I did for another, 10 years, I then went into consultancy. I'd been consulting for those guys. I knew how online business worked. I knew how marketing worked online, search engine optimization, So I then said, okay, I'll set up a business. And I went and did that. So I taught other businesses how to do that. And not just in the music space, actually. In all sorts of verticals, I did that. And it was good fun. I made lots of money. We, really enjoyed it for a while. But it felt a little bit like... I just didn't feel like I was doing what I wanted to do, I didn't feel like it was my groove, you know what I mean? I was putting on a suit and going into these swanky PR offices with 60-foot glass tables, it's like, fuck, it's not me, Anyway, then COVID came along, and that was, now, don't get me wrong, COVID was hideous, wasn't it, for lots of reasons, but let's take that out of the argument for a minute. And I just want to say that COVID for me was brilliant, because it enabled me to find one of those milestones in life which changed things for me going forward. And I used to have a weekly call, actually it was almost daily after a while, with one of my best mates. And he said to me, and he's known me since we were kids, from secondary school. So he did the lights and the videos in the bands I was in. We've always fucked around with music, recorded it and stuff. He's always been there. He knows that it's in me, in my blood. He knows that that's what excites me. He just knows how I am around music and the creation of it. And he said, what are you doing? I said, what do you mean? He said, why don't you just make music again? And I was like, he said, just make some videos, okay. So I did, it was COVID, and it was like, do you know what? That's a good idea. I think I will. So I began during COVID again. Now I had to kind of relearn music production, because I hadn't pissed around with it for 10 years since selling the school, really. But the thing is, with music production, even though we have all these fancy tools, software, amazing things that do everything for us, the basic principles are the same. They have been the same since this, the invention of music technology. Doesn't matter what software you use, doesn't matter what plugins you use, the principles are the same. So it didn't take that long to learn it again, and get up to a reasonable level that I could record. I started with cover songs. I got a green screen, crazy outfits, and I just started prancing around, clowning around, making funny music videos. And these still exist on a YouTube channel, and it was good fun. And the feedback was good. People liked it, and I was entertaining people. But I must admit, after a while, it became arduous for me, because I was spending weeks on a video, literally weeks, getting the outfits, green screening, edits. And I got to the stage after so many of these, I thought, look, realistically, how many of these can I do a year? 12? Like one a month? Maybe a bit more rapidly if I do them quicker. And it felt like I was becoming a video editor. And the music was great. I was enjoying that bit. And once the music was done, I was like, oh shit, I've got to make a video now. And I didn't want to. Not in that way. This is different. I love just talking and explaining things. But, making a produced video was just not me. I just didn't want to do that. So I lost interest. And the music production started taking over. And I started writing more and more tracks. I was starting to upload them to places like BeatStars and And then I thought, well, this is great. I'm making all these beats, and I got pretty good at it, because if you do anything repetitively and you practice it, and I think that's what creativity is. If you practice things and you do them often, you get better at them. If you might write 100 songs and one might be good. And I think Paul McCartney said something like that, didn't he? I can't remember the quote exactly, but if you write 100 songs, one might be good. And it is about practicing that and exercising that creative muscle, I believe. So I got pretty good at that. And I even, got some albums in some music production libraries for potential film use. And that was like, wow, this is cool. And then I was starting to hustle a bit, like reaching out to artists. Hey, do you want to try this beat? Look at this beat. It's a nice beat for you. You could do some rapping over that. And that felt like a bit of it just felt like hustling. I just didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be spending like, every 5 minutes checking Instagram. You got that beat? Do you want me to send over another one? It just felt like a hustle I didn't want to do. So I now feel like I've come full circle, and I want to just share I just want to talk to you. Like having had lots of experience around all this, building online schools, playing guitar, making music, doing production, AI coming along. I mean, can you imagine, when I started my audiocourses.com back in the late 90s, can you imagine what would have been possible if I had AI then? So I want to talk about AI. Of course I do. I want to talk about music production tips. I want to play guitar, help you play guitar, and I help you become a better musician. I think the educator's strong in me, and I want to come back and do some more of that. So that's what we're going to do. I hope you're along for the ride. I just want to be sharing my thoughts with you, what I'm up to, how it's going, along the way, and you'll join in on this journey. So thank you for listening, and if you're liking this, don't forget I am on x.com as audio. Follow me over there. But most importantly, this is going to become my web page. This YouTube channel is where I'm going to do everything, and I've got a few other ones which I might put some things on, like some releases and AI stuff. But I think generally this is going to be the place where I'm going to talk most. Keep doing guitar tutorials, do music production things, have commentary about what I'm doing, maybe even interview some producers in the future and all that kind of stuff. It's lovely to have your engagement. Thanks very much.